In the mid-1970s, a serial killer terrorized the people of New York, particularly brunettes, and then a tiny mistake led to his arrest. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's get into today's story. Valentina Suriani was a student at St. Catherine's Roman Catholic High School in the Bronx. She was well-liked by her friends, pretty, life of the party type. She got along great with boys, particularly because she was a big-time sports fan. She loved the New York Mets, and growing up, she had actually watched them win a World Series in 1969. Now, a lot of Valentina's friends came from the Christian youth organization over at St. Lucy's Church, or the CYO for short. The priest in charge of this CYO was Father Oliverio, and he did everything for these youngsters. In December of 1975, Father Oliverio organized a field trip of sorts for the CYO. He would take them into Manhattan, and they would get to see the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, they could see the Christmas lights and the window displays, all that good stuff. However, renting a school bus seemed to be out of the CYO's price range. So something Father Oliverio decided to do instead was rent a U-Haul truck and throw all 70 students in the back of this truck. It's the 70s. Now, a U-Haul truck doesn't have any windows in the back, there's no way for light to get in, there's no way for air to get in. So Valentina and the rest of these students are crammed into the back of this truck. And every time it came to a stop at a traffic light, what they would do is they'd open the hatch and release the door. That way they could let some light in, but more importantly, some fresh air in as well. Now, one time when they opened the hatch for the back of the U-Haul, there was a car directly behind them with 3 teenage boys in it. And they are laughing and having a good time because this is really an only in New York kind of moment for them. Now, Valentina is enjoying the playfulness of this. She's teasing the boys, she's making faces at them, and the boys keep following the truck. Every time they'd open the hatch, they'd still see the boys directly behind them. When they made their final stop at Rockefeller Center, the boys got out of their car and they met everybody, and they all hit it off. So Valentina, among others in the group, decided they would convince these boys to join the CYO. And these boys did. They hit it off with everybody. And after a year or so, Valentina actually started dating one of those boys. His name was Alexander Esau. At this point, Alex is a tow truck operator, and Valentina had graduated from high school and was now attending Lehman College with aspirations of becoming either a model or an actress. Valentina's family had also recently moved into a new apartment. So, on April 16th, 1977, Alex came over and picked up Valentina for a date. They went out, they had a great time, and they were winding down the night. They were getting ready for the night to be over. So around 3 a.m. on April 17th, so well into the night, Alex pulls his car over on the service road for the Hutchinson River Parkway, and this is only about a block away from where Valentina's family's new apartment was. Now, the two of them may have just been talking in the car, or maybe sharing a romantic moment before the night was done. However, this would be cut short because a man would approach their vehicle. Without hesitation, this man would pull out a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver and fire it 4 times into the car. Now, a neighbor nearby is awoken by the gunshots and immediately calls the police. But by the time the police arrived, the man was gone, and both Valentina and Alex were dead. Now, the police still search the car. They're looking for clues, and inside the car is a white envelope addressed to the NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli. Inside this envelope is a handwritten letter that's filled with typos, but it was from the killer. And for the first time, the killer identified himself as the son of Sam. Valentina and Alex had just become the 4th and 5th murder victims claimed by the son of Sam. To get back to the beginning of this, we need to go back 9 months, but just around the block. On July 28, 1976, 2 girls named Donna Loria and Jody Valenti went to a discotheque in New Rochelle, which is just north of the Bronx. And they did this every Wednesday. Donna was an 18-year-old emergency medical technician, and Jody was a 19-year-old nurse. So a little after midnight on July 29th, the 2 girls get home from the disco, and they park outside of Donna's apartment in the Bronx. Now, the 2 girls would just chit-chat in the car for a little while, but then eventually Donna's parents came home from whatever they were doing that night. Donna's father noticed that the 2 girls were sitting in the car, so he comes over to the car and starts talking to them. and eventually says to his daughter Donna, "Hey, I'm going to go upstairs, we're going to get the dog, and then we can do a little walk around the block before bedtime." So Donna's dad disappeared into the apartment building, and Donna got out of the car to say goodbye to her friend. But as she did so, an unidentified man started approaching the car with a paper bag in his hand. And that man was the son of Sam. This man pulled a .44 caliber revolver out of that paper bag and fired 4 times in the direction of Donna and Jody. The man ran away immediately after firing that 4th shot. One of those shots hit Jody in the thigh, but one of those shots also hit Donna in the temple, and she unfortunately died instantly. Now, just so you understand for the rest of the story, a .44 caliber bullet is a large bullet. It's capable of taking down bears. Its job is to kill. So the fact that we get a handful of survivors in this story from this point forward is truly remarkable. And Jody is one of those survivors. When Jody was questioned by the police, she was able to give a little bit of a physical description of the man, but she'd never seen him before. And when they talked to neighbors and even Donna's father, they had all mentioned that there was this yellow car that had been circling blocks for hours. But with a lack of a motive, the police weren't able to catch this guy right away, and he'd be able to strike again and again and again for the next 12 months. Just like Valentina, Donna was a teenager living in the Bronx. She had shoulder-length dark hair, and she was out after midnight when she was attacked. However, not all of these attacks occurred in the Bronx. The second victim was 26-year-old Christine Front, who was born in Austria but made her way to New York when she was a little girl. As an adult, she fell in love with this bartender named John Deal, and the two of them were engaged to be married. On January 30th, so about 6 months after the first shooting, the two lovers were getting ready for a night out in Forest Hills, Queens, after having just seen an evening showing of the movie Rocky. They started warming the car up around 12:30 a.m., and before they could leave, the son of Sam struck again. He walked right up to the passenger side window and fired 3 .44 caliber shots into the car. John was able to drive away with minor injuries, but Christine had been hit twice. So they made their way to the hospital, and Christine made it to the hospital, but unfortunately she was not able to pull through. The .44 caliber bullet was unique enough to the point where police were starting to question, are these shootings connected to one another? Donna Lauria had been killed with the same type of bullet, and other people had been shot at over the last 6 months with the same exact kind of bullet. In October of 1976, Rosemary Keenan had her car shot into in Flushing, Queens. Rosemary was with her boyfriend Carl DeNaro, a 20-year-old security guard who would need a metal plate to replace a portion of his skull, but ultimately the two of them did survive the attack. However, the injury did disqualify Carl's service for the United States Air Force, which he was about to enter. The following month, a man approached Joanne Lamino on her porch in Floral Park, which is part of Nassau County. It's actually not in the 5 boroughs, it's just east of Queens. Joanne was with her friend Donna DeMasi, who were both shot at by the son of Sam after he pretended to need directions. DeMasi was shot in the neck, but her injury was non-life-threatening, and Lamino was shot in the back, and she'd be left paralyzed from the waist down. Now, the common thread for the police seemed to be that the same weapon was being used to target young women who had shoulder-length dark brown hair. However, that information wasn't being made public until March 1977. On March 8th, so about a month after Christine Front had been killed in Forest Hills, a Columbia University student named Virginia Voskerichian was simply walking home from school. She actually lived a couple blocks away from where Christine had been killed. Now, while Virginia was walking, she noticed that there was an armed man approaching her, and in a desperate attempt to try to protect herself, she held her textbooks up in front of her face. However, the man pointed the gun straight at the textbooks, and the bullet went straight through the books and into her head, and she became murder victim number 3 for the son of Sam. 2 days after Virginia's death, the police held a press conference and let the public know what they knew. And this startled every brunette in the city. They would all rush to get their haircuts, or they would dye their hair, or they would purchase wigs. And because the descriptions that were out there were all conflicting, it could be anybody. The police referred to this man in the press conference as the .44 caliber killer. But after Valentina and Alex had been killed and they had this new moniker attached to this letter that they had received, they forever began calling him the son of Sam. This letter that was left behind had plenty of details that needed to be sorted through. For example, this Sam character apparently was an abusive father and needed blood to preserve his youth. He also had suffered many heart attacks throughout his life. But the most important detail in this letter was how it was closed, by saying that the killer would be back. The running theory was that this killer, might be blaming a dark-haired nurse for his father's death, that the father may have died of a heart attack, and this could have tied back into the first victims, which were Donna Lauria and Jody Valenti, who were an EMT and a nurse, respectively. 2 months later, on May 30th, a columnist at the Daily News received a handwritten letter from someone claiming to be the son of Sam. And in this letter, he praised the columnists, he praised the police who were working on the case, and said, when you guys finally catch me, I'm going to buy everyone a new pair of shoes. The Daily News actually published that letter a week later after the police gave them permission to do so. And to this day, it is still the single highest selling edition of the Daily News. More than 1.1 million copies were sold. About a month after that letter was published in the newspaper, the son of Sam would attempt to strike again. This time with Judy Placido and Salvatore Lupo, who were sitting in their car in Bayside, Queens at 3 a.m. on June 26th. Both Sal and Judy would suffer injuries, but both of them survived the attack. In fact, an eyewitness actually gave a partial license plate number too. The final killing occurred shortly after the anniversary of the first killing on July 31st, 1977. The victim was 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz, who was on a first date with 20-year-old Robert Valenti at the time. They were walking through the park in Bath Beach, Brooklyn, and Stacy started to get the idea that someone was watching them. Now, there were plenty of people in the park, but she was uncomfortable to the point where she asked Robert if they could leave. So Robert agrees, that's okay, we can leave. And they head back to the car, which is parked under this street lamp, and they get in the car, and Robert says to her, I know that you're a little scared because there's a serial killer going around right now, but you're blonde, you have nothing to worry about. And he convinced her to stay for just a couple extra minutes. Then they started kissing in the car. From here, the story sounds very familiar because, again, an unidentified man came to the passenger side window, took out a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, and fired it 4 times into the car. Both Stacy and Robert were shot in the head twice, and although it looked like they might both initially survive, Stacy did die at the hospital, and Robert lost one of his eyes and most of his vision in the other eye. About a week later, a Bath Beach resident named Cecilia Davis was walking her dog right around that area where the latest shooting had taken place. And she noticed that there was a patrol officer that was giving a parking ticket to a car that was kind of close to a fire hydrant. Shortly after the officer left, she would pass by a young man on the sidewalk, and she immediately knew something wasn't right. He was carrying some sort of dark object in his hand, and she didn't really want to wait around and figure out what it was. She quickly grabbed her dog and raced into her home. Now, as she ran into her home, she started to hear these gunshots behind her in the streets, and she slams the door shut, she falls to the floor, she's crying, she's scared, but physically, she's unharmed. And she would keep this information to herself for the next 4 days before she would finally contact the police. When she contacted the police, the only real lead that she had on this guy was standing kind of close to one of these cars that was parked too close to the fire hydrant. So the police said, you know what, let's check out all the cars that were ticketed in the area. And one of those cars happened to be a yellow 1970 Ford Galaxy belonging to a man named David Berkowitz. So this NYPD detective that's in charge would make a phone call to the Yonkers Police Department asking if they could schedule some sort of interview with David Berkowitz because that's where he lived, in Yonkers. And the police dispatcher responded, I know who that is. He lives directly behind me. In fact, we're already investigating him for a bunch of weird crimes in our neighborhood. The dispatcher also told the detective that Berkowitz had shot and wounded their black Labrador retriever. That dog belonged to her father, and her father's name was Sam. Everything was starting to come together, and they truly believed this could be our guy. The following day, the NYPD tracked down Berkowitz's car, where they found a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver sitting in the back seat, along with a duffel bag filled with ammunition, crime scene maps, and another threatening letter, this one to the inspector of the Son of Sam task force. Berkowitz left his apartment around 10 p.m. on August 10th, made it to his car where the 2 detectives were there with their guns drawn, and he simply raised his hands, smiled, and said, well, you got me. A little backstory on the man in question. David Berkowitz was born Richard David Falco. His birth mother gave him up for adoption after his father, who was a married man, told her, "Get rid of the baby or I'm leaving." It's believed that David's adoptive parents told him at a young age that his mother had died during childbirth, and he felt immense guilt over this. Then when David was 14, his adoptive mother died, and it was like losing a mom all over again. And then shortly after that, his adoptive father remarried a woman that he didn't like very much. Berkowitz graduated from Columbus High School in the Bronx, which is the same high school that many of Valentina Suriani's CYO friends went to. After graduating, he joined the Army, and after being honorably discharged, he learned the truth about his birth mother and how she was still alive, just didn't want him. He was never the same after that. He had 2 different fathers in his life, and neither of them really seemed to care about him at all. He was struggling with his identity, with his purpose in life, the idea that nobody really wanted him. It was all just pushing him right over the edge. So David began to take the lives of women that he believed were impure. And as for his adoptive mother, the one who lied about his birth mother and was now dead and buried in the ground, she looked a lot like many of his victims. Berkowitz confessed to the shootings and was interested in pleading guilty. He also claimed that Sam's black Labrador retriever was possessed by an ancient demon, and that it was commanding him to commit these murders because it needed the blood of pretty young girls. Defense lawyers told Berkowitz, "You should plead not guilty by means of insanity." But he didn't want to do that. But at his sentencing, Berkowitz attempted to jump out of the 7-story window of this courtroom. So another psych evaluation was issued before they could proceed, but they did all that, and they determined he was of sound mind. David Berkowitz was sentenced to 25 years to life in consecutive terms for each of the murders that he committed. He is currently being held at Shawangunk Correctional Facility in New York. So that's going to do it. Hopefully I'll have some happier content for you in the future, but for now, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. In fact, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment below, and until next time, deuces, kids.